Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really fascinating chapter all about how the global economy actually works, and more importantly, how it's literally shaping your everyday life. We're going to take the core concepts from the source material and break them down step by step. So if you've ever found yourself wondering how on earth the products you buy actually make it into your hands, or why the modern job market is as wild as it is today, well, you are definitely in the right place.
So, let's kick things off with a massive shift that you've probably noticed in your own life as a consumer. Just think about the last time you went shopping for, say, a new phone, a camera, or even just bought a new TV. The sheer volume of choices we have today is honestly staggering. But, it absolutely wasn't always this way. So how did we actually get here?
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at how drastically things have changed. We've essentially gone from a reality of highly limited, strictly local options to this massive global buffet of brands in just a few short decades. The source chapter actually uses a really brilliant anchor for this, which is cars in India. Decades ago, if you looked at Indian roads, you'd basically see just two cars, the Ambassador and the Fiat. That was pretty much it. But today, Indians are buying automobiles produced by literally all the top companies in the entire world. This incredible ground-up transformation of our markets is just the perfect starting point for our topic.
Here is the game plan for how we'll unpack the chapter today. First, we'll look at the modern consumer reality. Second, the sheer power of MNCs. Third, the technology and policy driving this whole thing. Fourth, the WTO trade debate. And finally, number 5, the everyday struggle for fairness.
All right, kicking off with Section 1, the modern consumer reality. Let's start by visualizing the sheer scale of the physical trade that actually stocks our shelves today. Historically, countries mainly traded raw materials, think things like cotton or spices. But today, the game has fundamentally changed. Today, we're talking about massive, finished automobiles being loaded onto transport trucks at ports, ready to be shipped across entire oceans. What crosses borders today isn't just raw materials anymore. It's incredibly complex, finished products. And doing this requires a massive, intricately coordinated physical network. Production is no longer neatly contained within a single country's borders. It is a globally dispersed operation. It's like a giant puzzle with pieces scattered all over the map.
Moving on to Section 2, the power of MNCs. You really have to ask yourself, what exactly is driving all this? Who is actually out there coordinating this massive global movement of goods? Well, that brings us straight to the main architects of this entire system.
Now, before we get too deep, it's totally crucial to establish exactly what globalization means in the context of this chapter. We're defining it as the rapid integration or interconnection between countries. And the main driving force behind this integration? That would be foreign trade and foreign investments made by multinational corporations. An MNC is, quite simply, a company that owns or controls production in more than one nation. They are the heavy hitters here.
So the real key is understanding how an MNC actually decides where to set up shop. They don't just throw a dart at a map, right? When an MNC decides to expand, they follow a very specific playbook to ensure their foreign investments earn absolute maximum profits. First off, they want to be close to their target consumer markets to save on transport costs. Second, and the chapter emphasizes this heavily, they hunt for low-cost, skilled and unskilled labor. And third, they actively seek out government policies that protect and favor their own business interests.
The result of this formula is honestly staggering. Take a standard pair of jeans, right? Produced in a developing country, but ultimately sold in the US for something like $145. By strategically shifting their production to regions where labor and manufacturing are dramatically cheaper, MNCs can keep their costs incredibly low, all while turning around and selling the finished product in developed markets at a massive premium. The difference? A gigantic increase in profit margins.
And that brings us to Section 3, drivers, technology, and policy. Now, while MNCs have certainly been around for a while, this whole integration process has accelerated at hyperspeed over the last 30 years. Let's look at the catalysts that made this rapid shift possible.
And hey, it's not just physical goods like cars and jeans driving this train. Rapid improvements in telecommunications and information technology have completely revolutionized how services are produced globally. Bustling IT call centers are literally driving the modern service sector. Thanks to the internet and satellite communication, an MNC based in, say, New York can easily have its customer service or data processing handled by highly skilled professionals in India working in real time for just a fraction of the cost.
Let's look at a really cool mini-story from the chapter to see how this builds into a complete global workflow. Imagine a London magazine. The text is written in London and zapped over the internet to Delhi. Designers in Delhi put together the layout on their computers. The actual physical magazine is printed right there, flown all the way back to London for the readers, and the Delhi team is paid instantly via e-banking. It seamlessly demonstrates how modern tech integrates global service production across continents in a matter of hours. The concept of distance? It practically just disappears.
But technology alone isn't enough to make this happen. We really have to look at government policy too. Think about importing Chinese toys into India. If the Indian government places a heavy tax on those imports, which is what we call a trade barrier, those toys instantly become more expensive. That protects domestic Indian toy makers for sure, but it restricts foreign trade. On the flip side, removing those taxes, a process called liberalization, allows those cheap imports to just flood right in. This integrates the markets and gives consumers much cheaper choices, but it drastically, and I mean drastically, increases the competition for those local producers.
Which leads us right into Section 4, the WTO trade debate. This massive global shift from trade barriers to open liberalization didn't just happen by accident. Let's zoom out to the macro level and check out the international forces pushing for these barrier-free policies worldwide.
Enter the World Trade Organization, or the WTO. This is a massive international body made up of about 160 member countries. Its primary goal is to establish the rules for international trade, with the explicitly stated aim of allowing free, unrestricted trade for all nations. So the WTO is really the primary architect of global trade liberalization. However, the everyday reality of how these rules are actually applied, well, that creates some serious international friction.
And this brings us to a really major global debate highlighted in the chapter. Developing countries are quick to point out that while they're basically forced to open their markets and tear down their barriers, developed nations often just continue to heavily subsidize their own farmers. So developing nations are rightly asking, is this actually free and fair trade? It perfectly encapsulates this intense, ongoing debate regarding the uneven balance of global power and how trade rules are truly enforced. And that brings us to our final piece of the puzzle, Section 5, the struggle for fairness. To truly understand this chapter, we have to look away from the giant macroeconomic forces for a second and focus on how these shifts impact real, local workers on the ground.
In this intense, high-stakes race to attract foreign investment, lots of governments are pressured to make their labor laws more flexible. Now, for companies, flexible just means the ability to hire workers for very short periods, only when demand is high, so they can cut down on permanent labor costs. But for the actual workers, this creates an incredibly precarious situation. Traditional job security and benefits just vanish, replacing stable employment with total uncertainty.
It's absolutely vital that we don't forget the human element caught up in these massive shifts. Just imagine a small local trader transporting goods on a bullock cart. They face a pretty stark reality when they are suddenly pitted against the massive, highly optimized cargo ships of the global MNCs. Small local producers, local farmers, and local traders often face just overwhelming, impossibly stiff competition when these global giants enter their local market. They simply don't have the wealth, the scale, or the tech to compete on the exact same playing field.
So, as we wrap up this explainer on the chapter, I really want to leave you with a pretty massive question to chew on. We started all of this by marveling at the endless choices we have as consumers today, the cars, the phones, the cheap electronics. But at what cost? We have to constantly weigh the balance between this endless consumer choice driven by MNCs and the ongoing struggle for a truly fair, equitable global economy that actually protects workers and small producers alike. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this completely fascinating topic. Keep questioning the world around you, and I will see you in the next explainer.